The evening air felt cool against May's skin as she stood outside the glass doors of the Riverside Music Academy. Her heart pounded in her chest and she clutched her small notebook tightly. At 42 years old, she was about to do something many would call foolish. She was going to ask for piano lessons. May had worked as an accountant at the same company for 15 years. Day after day, she sat in her cubicle, typing numbers into spreadsheets, attending meetings, and eating lunch at the same corner table in the break room. She had a comfortable routine, a decent apartment, and a life that many would call stable, but something was missing. As a child, May had dreamed of playing the piano. She remembered watching a woman perform on television, her fingers dancing across the keys, creating sounds that made May's young heart soar. But her family couldn't afford a piano, let alone lessons. "Music doesn't put food on the table," her father would say whenever she mentioned it. So May did what was expected. She studied hard, got a practical degree, and found a stable job. But the dream never really died. It just sat quietly in a corner of her heart, waiting. 3 weeks ago, May had attended her niece's birthday party. Her sister had hired a piano teacher to give the 8-year-old lessons as a gift. Watching the young girl press the keys with clumsy fingers, something stirred inside May. That night, she couldn't sleep. The next morning, she searched online for adult piano lessons and found Riverside Music Academy. Now standing outside the building, May almost turned around and left. Through the glass, she could see children with instrument cases, teenagers laughing together, and young parents waiting on benches. No one looked over 40. No one looked like they were starting from scratch. "You can do this," May whispered to herself, pushing open the door. The lobby smelled like lemon polish and old books. A young woman with bright red hair sat behind the reception desk, tapping away at a computer. "Excuse me," May said, her voice coming out smaller than she intended. "I'd like to ask about piano lessons." The receptionist looked up, her fingers pausing mid-type. "Sure, is it for your child?" May felt her cheeks warm. "No, it's for me, actually." The woman's eyebrows rose slightly. "Oh, adult lessons. Well, we do offer those, though most of our adult students have some background already. Have you played before?" "No," May admitted, feeling increasingly out of place. "I've never played any instrument, but I've always wanted to learn the piano." The receptionist's smile remained in place, but May didn't miss the slight shift in her expression. That look people get when they're trying not to show what they're really thinking. "I see. Well, let me get you an information packet. We have a few teachers who work with adult beginners." She handed May a glossy folder. "The rates are inside. Adults usually take a 30-minute lesson once a week. We recommend at least starting that way." May nodded, looking through the papers. The prices made her wince a little, but she had been saving for years. Not for anything specific, just saving because that's what responsible adults did. Maybe this was finally something worth spending on. "I'd like to sign up," she said firmly. The receptionist looked surprised. "Don't you want to think about it first?" "I've been thinking about it for 30 years, May replied, surprising herself with her boldness. "I don't want to wait anymore." 20 minutes later, May was enrolled in weekly lessons with Teacher Lou, one of the few instructors willing to take on a complete beginner in her 40s. Her first lesson was scheduled for the following Tuesday. The days dragged by. At work, May found herself doodling piano keys in the margins of her notepad during meetings. She watched countless online videos of piano basics, mimicking finger positions on her desk when she thought no one was looking. Finally, Tuesday arrived. May left work early, changed into a nice blouse, and arrived at the academy 15 minutes before her scheduled lesson. As she sat in the waiting area, a group of teenage students emerged from one of the practice rooms, instrument cases in hand. "Did you hear Mr. Peterson got a new student? Some old lady who's never touched a piano before," one of them said, not bothering to lower his voice. "Seriously? Why even start at that age?" Another replied with a laugh. "My mom tried to learn guitar last year. She gave up after like 3 weeks, said her fingers wouldn't cooperate." May stared at her sensible shoes, pretending not to hear. "Old lady, she was only 42. But to these kids, anyone over 30 probably seemed ancient. A door opened and a man in his 50s appeared, beckoning to May. "Ms. Chen? I'm Teacher Liu." Teacher Liu's studio was small but neat, dominated by a gleaming black upright piano. Certificates and photos covered one wall. Teacher Liu with students holding trophies, Teacher Liu performing on stage. "So," he said after they sat down, The front desk tells me you're a complete beginner. No musical background at all? That's right, May nodded. I never had the chance to learn as a child. Teacher Liu's face remained neutral, but May could sense his assessment. She had seen that look before, people quickly calculating her chances of success and finding them slim. You should know that learning piano requires significant time and commitment, he said carefully. Progress can be slower for adult beginners. Our fingers and brains are less flexible as we age. I understand, May said. I'm prepared to work hard. Teacher Liu nodded, though he didn't look convinced. Let's start with the basics then. I'll show you how to sit properly at the piano. The next 30 minutes were both thrilling and humbling. May learned the correct posture, the names of the keys, and tried to play a simple 5-note scale. Her fingers felt stiff and uncooperative, refusing to move independently. Notes that should have sounded smooth came out choppy and uneven. That's enough for today, Teacher Liu said after May's 5th attempt at the scale. For homework, practice this scale 15 minutes each day. No more than that at first. We don't want you straining your hands. Only 15 minutes? May had planned to practice for hours. But she nodded, not wanting to seem difficult. As she gathered her things, Teacher Liu handed her a thin book of beginner exercises. These are normally for children, but the principles are the same for everyone. May looked down at the book with its cartoon animals and bright colors. Hot Cross Buns was listed as one of the first songs. Thank you, she said, trying not to show her disappointment. She had dreamed of playing beautiful classical pieces, not nursery rhymes. As she left the studio, she passed a girl of about 12 playing something fast and complex in another room, her small hands flying across the keys. May felt a sharp pang of regret. If only she had started as a child. In the lobby, the teenagers from earlier were still hanging around. One nudged another as May walked past. How was your first lesson? The receptionist asked brightly. It was interesting, May replied, aware of the teenagers watching. Don't worry. Everyone struggles at first, the receptionist said in a voice that was probably meant to be encouraging, but came across as patronizing. On her way out, May heard a boy's voice behind her. Bet she doesn't last a month. That night, May sat in her quiet apartment looking at the beginner's book on her coffee table. The children's illustrations seemed to mock her. Maybe she was being foolish. Maybe she was too old. Maybe some dreams were meant to stay dreams. She thought about not going back, about calling to cancel her lessons. No one would be surprised. She could save herself the embarrassment of failing publicly. She could go back to her comfortable, predictable life. But then she remembered how it felt to touch the piano keys. Even if she hadn't played them well, she remembered the feeling that had washed over her, like she'd finally found something she'd been searching for without knowing it. May walked to her laptop and started searching online. 2 hours later, she had rented a digital piano with headphones. It would be delivered tomorrow. She couldn't afford to buy one outright yet, but the rental would let her practice without bothering her neighbors. She also ordered 5 more beginner books, not the cartoon-filled kind, but ones designed for adult learners. And finally, she set up a practice schedule, planning to wake up an hour earlier each morning. If she only had 15 minutes of assigned practice, she'd make it the best 15 minutes possible, and maybe after mastering those exercises, she'd practice for 15 minutes more. I'll show them, May whispered to her empty apartment. I'll show them all. The delivery men huffed as they maneuvered the digital piano into May's apartment. Her living room wasn't exactly spacious to begin with, and now she would have to get used to an even tighter squeeze. She had to move her bookshelf next to the TV stand and push her small dining table against the kitchen counter to make room. Where do you want it, ma'am? Asked one of the delivery men, already looking tired even though it was only 10 in the morning. By the window, please, May said, pointing to the spot she'd cleared last night. It was the only place with good natural light, and she liked the idea of being able to look outside while she practiced. Once they left, May stood in front of the piano, running her fingers lightly over the keys without pressing them. The rental wasn't anything fancy, just a basic model with standard features. But to May, it might as well have been a grand piano on a concert stage. This was hers, at least for now, and no one could tell her she couldn't play it. She plugged in the headphones that came with the rental and tentatively pressed middle C, the only note she could confidently identify so far. The sound filled her ears and she smiled. She opened her beginner's book to the first exercise and began to practice. 15 minutes quickly turned into 30, then an hour. Her fingers felt clumsy and she kept making the same mistakes over and over. The simple 5-note scale that Teacher Liu had shown her seemed impossible to play smoothly. But May didn't give up. She played the same notes again and again until her fingers ached. When she finally checked the time, she was shocked to see it was already past noon. She had been practicing for nearly 2 hours. Her stomach growled, reminding her she hadn't eaten breakfast yet. As she made herself a simple lunch of leftover rice and vegetables, May thought about her next lesson, scheduled for Tuesday. She wanted to show Teacher Liu that she was serious about learning. Maybe if she practiced hard enough, he would stop looking at her with that doubtful expression. The week passed in a blur of work and practice. May woke up at 5 each morning to squeeze in an hour of piano before getting ready for work. She practiced again during her lunch break, using a paper keyboard she had printed out and laminated. And in the evenings she would play until her neighbors knocked on the wall, even though she was wearing headphones and the digital piano made very little actual noise. Her sister called on Sunday as she did every week. "How's work?" Ling asked after they had exchanged the usual pleasantries. "Same as always," May replied. She hesitated, then added, "But I've started something new. I'm taking piano lessons." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Piano, like the musical instrument?" "No, the furniture," May said with a small laugh. "Yes, of course the instrument, but why? And isn't that expensive? You always said music lessons cost too much." May sighed. She had known her sister wouldn't understand. Ling had always been the practical one, even more so than May. "I've always wanted to learn. And yes, it costs money, but I have savings." Ling said, in that tone that meant she disapproved but was trying not to show it. "Well, I suppose it's good to have hobbies. Just don't spend too much on it." "You know you need to save for retirement." May bit back a sharp reply. At 42, she was well aware of the need to save for retirement. That's all she had been doing for years. Saving, being careful, planning for a future that seemed to get further away the more she reached for it. "I'm not going to go broke from piano lessons, Ling," she said instead. "Anyway, how are the kids?" The conversation moved on, but May could tell her sister thought she was being foolish. It was the same look Teacher Liu had given her, the same attitude the teenagers at the music school had, as if she were trying to do something that wasn't meant for someone like her. Tuesday came, and May arrived at her second lesson feeling nervous but excited. She had practiced faithfully, more than the 15 minutes Teacher Liu had recommended, and she felt she had improved. Not dramatically, but she could play the 5-note scale with fewer mistakes now. "Good afternoon, Ms. Chen," Teacher Liu said as she entered his studio. "Did you practice your scales?" "Yes, every day," May replied eagerly. "I rented a digital piano so I could practice properly." Teacher Liu's eyebrows rose slightly. "That's unexpected dedication. Most adult beginners just use a keyboard app on their phones for the first few weeks." He gestured to the piano. "Show me what you've been working on." May sat down, took a deep breath, and began to play the scale. Up and down, 5 notes, both hands. She made a few mistakes, hitting wrong notes twice and playing unevenly, but she finished the exercise. Teacher Liu nodded thoughtfully. "You've been practicing more than 15 minutes a day, haven't you?" May felt her cheeks flush. "Is that bad?" "Not necessarily. But you need to be careful not to develop bad habits or strain your hands." He demonstrated the proper hand position again. "Your wrists are too stiff. Relax them more." The lesson continued with Teacher Liu introducing a new exercise and a simple piece, still from the children's book, but at least it was an actual song now, not just scales. "Before you go," Teacher Liu said as the lesson ended, "I want to show you something." He turned to a small shelf behind the piano and pulled out a book with a plain black cover. "This is more appropriate for adult beginners. The children's books work, but I can see you want something more substantial." May took the book, opening it to find simple arrangements of classical pieces and folk songs. "No cartoon animals, no nursery rhymes?" "Thank you," she said, genuinely touched by the gesture. "Don't thank me yet," Teacher Liu replied with a small smile, the first real smile he had given her. "These are still challenging for someone at your level. But if you continue to practice as you have been, you might be ready for some of the simpler pieces in a month or two." A month or two seemed like a long time, but May nodded. She was in this for the long haul. As she left the academy, May noticed the same group of teenage students lounging in the lobby. They fell quiet as she walked past, but she heard one of them whisper, "Still here?" Thought she'd have quit by now. May held her head high and walked out, clutching her new book to her chest. The next few weeks fell into a rhythm. May would wake early to practice, go to work, practice during lunch, come home, practice more, sleep and repeat. Her coworkers started to notice the change in her routine. "Why do you always eat at your desk now?" asked Pavel from accounting one day. "You used to join us in the break room." May looked up from her paper keyboard, which she had been quietly tapping while eating her lunch. "I'm just busy," she said vaguely. "With what?" "Tax season is months away," Pavel persisted, peering at her desk. "What's that?" "A keyboard." May reluctantly explained about her piano lessons. Pavel's reaction was similar to her sister's. Initial surprise followed by poorly concealed skepticism. "Piano, huh? Isn't that something kids usually do?" "Anyone can learn at any age," May replied, trying to keep her voice even. Pavel shrugged. "I guess. My daughter took lessons for a while but quit after 6 months. Said it was boring. How long have you been at it?" "Just a few weeks." "Well, good luck with that. Maybe you can play at the company Christmas party," he said with a chuckle that made it clear he didn't think that was actually possible. May forced a smile and turned back to her paper keyboard. She was getting used to people's reactions, but they still stung. At home that evening, May sat at her piano, working through a particularly difficult passage in one of the pieces from Teacher Lou's book. Her fingers kept stumbling over the same section. After the 20th attempt, she let out a frustrated groan and closed the book. Maybe everyone was right. Maybe she was too old to learn. Maybe her brain and fingers just weren't capable of doing what she was asking of them. She was about to get up when her phone buzzed with a notification. It was a video that one of her friends had shared. An elderly man in his 80s playing a complex jazz piece on the piano. The caption read, "He started learning at 65. Never too late." May watched the video twice, then opened her book again and placed her fingers on the keys. One more try, and then another, and another. By the time she went to bed, her fingers were sore and her back ached from sitting at the piano for so long. But she had played through the difficult passage without mistakes once. Just once, but it was enough to remind her why she was doing this. As she drifted off to sleep, May thought about the elderly jazz pianist. If he could start at 65 and play like that, what could she do starting at 42? She fell asleep with the music still playing in her head and her fingers twitching slightly against the blanket, practicing even in her dreams. 3 months had passed since May's first piano lesson. The leaves outside her apartment window had changed from bright green to deep orange, and were now falling in the chilly autumn wind. Inside, May sat at her piano, no longer a rental but her own. She had made the decision to buy it 2 weeks ago, after Teacher Lou had told her she was progressing faster than he had expected. "You have a good ear," he had said during their last lesson, after she played a simple Mozart piece with only a few mistakes. "And you practice more consistently than most of my students." That small bit of praise had meant more to May than she cared to admit. She had smiled all the way home from the lesson and immediately called the music store to convert her rental to a purchase. It had stretched her budget thin, but every time she sat down to play, she knew it was worth it. Today was Sunday, her day for longer practice sessions. May had been working on the same piece for nearly 2 weeks, a simplified arrangement of Beethoven's Für Elise. Not the full, complex version that concert pianists played, but challenging enough for someone who had only been playing for 3 months. She placed her fingers on the keys and began to play, trying to lose herself in the music rather than focusing on each individual note. Teacher Lou had been encouraging her to think about the feeling of the pieces, not just the technical aspects. "Music is mathematics," he had explained, "but it's also emotion. You need both." May had been surprised when he said that. Mathematics was something she understood well. It had been her best subject in school, and she used numbers every day in her accounting job. The idea that her analytical mind might actually be helpful in learning music was encouraging. As she played, she noticed her fingers moving more naturally now, finding the keys without her having to look down as much. The piece wasn't perfect. She still stumbled on a tricky section in the middle, but it was recognizably Für Elise, not just a series of notes. The phone rang, interrupting her practice. It was Ling. "Hey," May said, slightly breathless from concentrating so hard. "What's up?" "Are you running?" Ling asked. "No, just practicing piano. Oh, you're still doing that? Ling sounded surprised. I thought it might have been a phase. May bit her tongue to stop herself from snapping at her sister. It's not a phase. I'm getting better, actually. That's nice, Ling said in a tone that suggested she didn't really think it was that important. Listen, Mom's birthday is coming up next month and I was thinking we could go in together on a gift. Maybe a weekend at that hot springs resort she's been talking about. They discussed the details, with May agreeing to pay her share, though it would mean tightening her budget even more after the piano purchase. After hanging up, May sat quietly for a moment thinking about her mother. Her parents had always emphasized practical skills over artistic ones. Study hard, get a good job, save money. That was the path to success in their view. Music, art, dance, those were nice hobbies but not serious pursuits. May had followed their advice her whole life. Until now. What would her mother think of her playing piano at 42? Would she see it as a waste of time and money? Or would she be proud that May was finally doing something just for herself? May shook her head, pushing the thoughts away. She turned back to the piano and started playing again, but her concentration was broken. After a few more stumbles, she closed the music book and decided to take a break. As she made herself a cup of tea, May's phone buzzed with a message notification. It was from Teacher Liu, unusual as he rarely contacted her outside of lessons. Good news. One of my younger students had to drop out of the winter recital due to illness. Would you be interested in taking the slot? It's in 6 weeks. Not much time to prepare, but I think you could do it if you're willing to put in extra work. Let me know by Tuesday. May nearly dropped her phone. A recital? Performing in front of people? The thought made her stomach tighten with anxiety. She had never played for anyone except Teacher Liu, and occasionally herself when she recorded her practice to listen for mistakes. She spent the rest of the day thinking about it, weighing the pros and cons. The thought of playing in public terrified her, but she also felt a small thrill at being considered good enough to perform. By evening, she still hadn't decided. The next day at work, May found it hard to concentrate on the quarterly financial reports. Her mind kept drifting to the recital, imagining herself on stage. In some versions, she played beautifully and received warm applause. In others, she froze or made so many mistakes that people laughed. You okay? Pavel asked when she had to ask him to repeat a question for the third time. You seem distracted. Before she could stop herself, May blurted out, My piano teacher asked if I want to play in a recital. Pavel's eyebrows shot up. A recital? Like on stage? With people watching? That's generally what a recital involves, yes, May said dryly. Are you going to do it? May shrugged. I don't know. It's scary. To her surprise, Pavel didn't make a joke or dismiss the idea. Instead, he nodded thoughtfully. My daughter was terrified before her dance recital last year. Cried the whole morning. But afterward, she couldn't stop talking about it. Said it was the best day ever. Did she do well? She tripped and fell during her solo, Pavel said with a small laugh. But she got up and finished. I've never been prouder of her. May hadn't expected this kind of response from Pavel, who had seemed so dismissive of her piano playing before. Thanks for telling me that, she said. So you'll do it? He asked, I think. Maybe I will. That evening, May sent a message to Teacher Liu. I'll do the recital. His reply came quickly. Excellent. We'll start preparing in tomorrow's lesson. The next 6 weeks were the most intense of May's piano journey so far. Teacher Liu selected a piece for her, a simplified arrangement of Debussy's Clair de Lune, and they began working on it immediately. This is ambitious for your level, he admitted. But I think it suits you. It has both mathematical precision and emotional depth. May practiced more than ever before, waking up at 4 instead of 5, playing during her lunch break, and sometimes staying up past midnight to get the piece just right. The music began to seep into her dreams, her fingers moving in her sleep as if playing the notes. 3 weeks before the recital, Teacher Liu suggested she play for a small audience as practice. Invite a few friends over. Get used to the feeling of having people watch you. May was hesitant, but she knew he was right. She needed to experience the pressure of an audience before the actual recital. She invited Pavel and 2 other co-workers, along with her sister Ling and her niece. To her surprise, they all accepted. The evening of the mini-recital arrived, and May's small apartment felt crowded with 5 guests. She had moved the piano slightly so they could all see her hands. and she'd even put out some snacks and drinks to make it feel more like a proper event. "I didn't know you were serious about this," Ling whispered as she helped May arrange chairs. "You actually bought a piano?" "I told you I was taking lessons," May replied. "Yes, but—" Ling trailed off, looking embarrassed. "I thought it was just a hobby." "It is a hobby. That doesn't mean it's not important." Before Ling could respond, the doorbell rang, announcing the arrival of Pavel and the others. May welcomed them nervously, suddenly questioning her decision to do this. These people knew her as a quiet accountant who kept to herself. What would they think when they saw this other side of her? After everyone was settled with drinks, May sat at the piano. Her hands were trembling slightly. "I've been learning piano for about 3 months," she explained, her voice quieter than she intended. "This is a piece I'm preparing for a recital. It's not perfect yet, but I wanted to practice playing for people." She took a deep breath and began to play Clair de Lune. The first few notes came out shaky, and she made a small mistake in the 4th measure. But instead of panicking, she continued, trying to focus on the music rather than the eyes watching her. As she played, something unexpected happened. The nervousness began to fade, replaced by a deep concentration. The presence of other people seemed to make the music more meaningful somehow, as if she were sharing a part of herself that had been hidden for too long. When she finished, there was a moment of silence and May looked up anxiously. Had she played that badly? Then Pavel started clapping, followed by the others. Her niece was beaming and even Ling looked impressed. "That was beautiful," one of her co-workers said. "I had no idea you could play like that. How long did you say you've been playing?" Pavel asked. "Just 3 months? That's amazing progress." May felt her cheeks warm at the praise. "It's still not very good. I make a lot of mistakes." "I didn't notice any mistakes," her niece piped up. "I thought it was perfect." After everyone left, May sat alone at her piano, replaying the evening in her mind. They had seemed genuinely impressed, not just being polite, but actually surprised and pleased by her playing. It made the recital seem less terrifying and more like an opportunity. The next day at work, Pavel stopped by her desk. "You know," he said casually, "a few of us were talking about coming to your recital. When is it again?" May looked up, startled. "You want to come?" "Sure, why not? It's not every day you get to see your coworker perform on stage. We're thinking of making a night of it. Dinner first, then the recital." For the first time since starting her piano journey, May felt not just determined but genuinely excited about sharing her music with others. Maybe this recital wouldn't be so terrifying after all. The day of the recital arrived with a light snowfall that dusted the city in white. May stood by her apartment window, watching the flakes drift down, trying to calm her racing heart. In just 6 hours, she would be playing Clair de Lune on a real stage. On a grand piano she had only practiced on twice during special rehearsal sessions at the academy. Her phone buzzed with a good luck text from Pavel, then another from Ling, saying she and her family would be in the 3rd row. May's stomach twisted with nerves. It was one thing to play for a small group in her apartment, but the recital hall could seat over 100 people. Teacher Liu had mentioned that most seats would be filled with parents, relatives, and friends of the students performing. Most of those students were children or teenagers who had been playing for years. May was the only adult performer and by far the newest pianist. What was she thinking, agreeing to this? She forced herself to eat a small breakfast, then sat at her piano to run through the piece one more time. Her fingers felt stiff and uncooperative. She made mistakes she hadn't made in weeks, hitting wrong notes and losing her place in the middle section. "This is a disaster," she muttered, closing the piano lid with more force than necessary. Maybe she should call Teacher Liu and back out, say she was sick. There would be other recitals when she was better prepared, more confident. She picked up her phone, but instead of calling Teacher Liu, she found herself watching the video of the elderly jazz pianist again, the one who had started learning at 65. "Worth every penny," she murmured, running her fingers lightly over the keys. She glanced at the clock and quickly finished her cup of tea. Her first student would arrive in 15 minutes, and she wanted to prepare the music books, yes. May now had students of her own, 3 so far. All adults who, like her, had decided it was not too late to learn. She wasn't a qualified teacher by any standard. She had only been playing for a year herself. But when an acquaintance had asked if she would teach his wife the basics after hearing about May's recital performance, she had cautiously agreed. Word had spread, And now she had 3 eager adult beginners who came to her apartment once a week for lessons. She charged much less than the professional teachers at the academy, making it clear that she was a beginner herself, just a little further along on the journey. "I can show you the first steps," she told them, "and I understand exactly how hard those first steps can be when you're not a child anymore." Teaching had unexpectedly become one of her greatest joys. Watching the same struggles she had faced, offering encouragement when they felt like giving up, celebrating their small victories, it all gave her a sense of purpose she hadn't expected. The doorbell rang, and May welcomed her first student of the day, a man in his 50s who had always wanted to play jazz but thought he was too old to start. "I practiced that scale you showed me," he said, proudly as he sat down at the piano. "My fingers still mix up sometimes, but it's getting better." "Show me," May said, smiling as she recognized the same determination in him that had driven her own progress. After all her lessons were finished for the day, May had an hour to practice before heading to her own weekly lesson with Teacher Lou. She was working on a piece by Chopin now, a real Chopin piece, not a simplified arrangement. It was challenging, pushing the limits of her technique, but that was what she loved about it. Her relationship with Teacher Lou had evolved over the past year. She was still his student, but there was a mutual respect now that hadn't been there in the beginning. He no longer looked surprised when she mastered a difficult passage or memorized a piece quickly. Instead, he simply nodded and moved on to the next challenge, constantly pushing her to grow. "You have unusual dedication," he had told her recently. Most adult beginners plateau after a few months, satisfied with playing simple pieces. "You keep pushing forward." May hadn't known how to respond to that. For her, there was no other way to approach the piano. Each piece mastered only made her hungrier for the next challenge. As she packed up her music to head to her lesson, May's phone rang. It was the director of Riverside Music Academy. "Ms. Chen," the director said when May answered. "I'm glad I caught you. I wanted to speak with you about an opportunity." May listened with growing surprise as the director explained. The academy was starting a new program specifically for adult beginners. Many people had been inspired by May's performance at the winter recital and had inquired about lessons, but were hesitant to join an academy full of children and teenagers. "We'd like you to be involved," the director continued. "Not as a teacher. You're still developing your own skills, of course, May, but as a sort of mentor or ambassador, someone who can speak to other adults about the journey, encourage them when it gets difficult. Perhaps do a short performance at our open house next month to show what's possible in a relatively short time." May was stunned. "You want me to represent the academy? But I'm just a student myself." "That's precisely why you'd be perfect for this role. You understand the challenges and rewards of learning as an adult in a way that our teachers, most of whom have been playing since childhood, simply can't." After her lesson that day, May discussed the offer with Teacher Liu. To her surprise, he had already heard about it and fully supported the idea. "The director is right," he said. "You have something valuable to offer other adult beginners. Proof that it's possible to start late and still play beautifully. Your technical skills are still developing, but your passion and perseverance are exactly what many adults need to see." May felt a strange mix of pride and humility. A year ago, she had been too intimidated to even enter the music school. Now she was being asked to inspire others. "I'll think about it," she promised. On her walk home, May took a detour through the park. The early evening air was warm with the promise of summer, and she wanted time to process everything that had happened. Finding a quiet bench beneath a flowering tree, she sat and watched children playing on a nearby playground. One little girl was showing another how to do a cartwheel, patiently demonstrating over and over until her friend got it right. The joy on both their faces when the second girl finally succeeded made May smile. It reminded her of the feeling she got when one of her adult students finally mastered a difficult piece. That mix of pride, accomplishment, and shared joy. Teaching wasn't something she had ever imagined doing, but now she couldn't imagine her life without it. And maybe that was the answer to the Academy's offer. If she could help other adults overcome their fears and discover the joy of making music, wasn't that worth doing? As May continued her walk home, she passed a small cafe with a "Help Wanted" sign in the window. But it wasn't the sign that caught her attention. It was the upright piano in the corner of the cafe. She stopped and peered through the window, watching as a young man played something jazzy while customers tapped their feet and nodded along. Impulsively, May went inside and approached the counter. The woman behind it had a friendly face and a name tag that read, Owner. "Excuse me," May said. "I noticed you have a piano. Do you have regular musicians who play here?" The owner smiled. "We have a few college students who come in for the weekend evening shifts. They play for tips and free coffee." "Are you a pianist?" "Yes," May said, surprising herself with the confidence in her voice. A year ago she would have said, "I'm learning," or "I'm just a beginner." Now she simply claimed the identity that had become such an important part of her life. "Yes, I am." They talked for a few minutes and May left with an invitation to come play the following Tuesday evening. It would be her first time playing in public outside of recitals, a whole new kind of challenge. That night, May called the academy director and accepted the offer to be part of the adult beginner program. Then she called her mother. "I have news," she said when her mother answered. "Good news, I hope?" "I think so. I'm going to be helping the music academy with their new program for adult beginners, and I'm going to play at a cafe next week." Her mother was quiet for a moment, then said, "You know, when you first told me about taking piano lessons, I was worried you were wasting your money. I thought it would be like that time you tried pottery classes and gave up after 3 weeks." May laughed. She had forgotten about that pottery disaster. "But this is different," her mother continued. "I've never seen you so alive. When you play, it's like seeing the real you for the first time. Your father was right about the music in your soul." Tears pricked at May's eyes. "Thanks, Mom, that means a lot." After they hung up, May sat at her piano in the growing darkness of her apartment. She didn't turn on the lamp or open any music books. Instead, she just began to play, letting her fingers find their own path across the keys. Over the past year, she had slowly started to improvise and even compose simple pieces of her own. Teacher Lou had encouraged this, saying it was the next natural step in her development as a musician. The melody that emerged now was contemplative but hopeful, reflecting her journey from that first terrifying day at the music school to today. There had been plenty of difficult moments, frustrating practice sessions, times when a piece seemed impossible, moments of doubt when she wondered if everyone who had ridiculed her had been right. But there had been far more moments of joy. The first time she played a piece all the way through without mistakes. The look on her niece's face when May taught her a simple duet they could play together. The sound of applause after her recital performance. The pride she felt when one of her adult students mastered something they had been struggling with. As the improvised melody came to a close, May realized she was smiling in the darkness. One decision, the decision to walk into that music school despite her fears, had changed everything. The next day, Pavel stopped by her desk at work. "Hey, I heard you're going to be playing at Cafe Luna next week. A bunch of us want to come watch. Is that okay?" "You want to watch me play at a cafe?" May asked, surprised. "Of course. We all went to your recital, remember? You were amazing." May thought back to how Pavel had initially reacted to her piano playing, the dismissive comments and skepticism. Now he was her biggest supporter at work, always asking about her progress and telling others about her accomplishments. "Yes, I remember," she said with a smile. "You're all welcome to come." "Great. Oh, and one more thing. Remember how you mentioned teaching adult beginners? I was thinking, maybe I could try. I mean, if you think it's not too late for someone like me to learn." May looked at her colleague, the same man who, less than a year ago, had laughed at the idea of an adult learning to play piano, and felt a surge of satisfaction. "It's never too late," she said. Never. She had saved it for moments like this when her courage faltered. As she watched his gnarled hands move confidently over the keys, May thought about how far she had come in just 4 months, from not being able to play a simple 5-note scale to preparing for a recital. It hadn't been easy. Her fingers had ached, her back had protested from hours of sitting at the piano, and there had been countless moments of frustration when a piece just wouldn't come together. But there had also been moments of pure joy, when the music flowed from her fingers as if she had been playing all her life. Moments when she lost track of time, caught up in the beauty of what she was creating. May put down her phone without making the call. She would play today, mistakes and all, at 3 o'clock. She arrived at Riverside Music Academy, dressed in the outfit she had carefully selected. A simple dark blue dress that wasn't too casual or too formal. The lobby was busy with excited children in their best clothes, proud parents taking photos, and teenagers trying to look cool despite their obvious nerves. May spotted the group who had once laughed at her, the teenagers who had bet she wouldn't last a month. They were huddled together near the rehearsal rooms, not paying any attention to her. They probably wouldn't even recognize her now, she realized. She was no longer the awkward newcomer who didn't belong. She was just another performer preparing for the recital. "Ah, Ms. Chen, there you are," Teacher Liu said, appearing at her elbow. "Come backstage. I want you to practice on the performance piano one more time before the audience arrives." The grand piano on stage was intimidating, larger and more responsive than her upright at home. The sound it produced was richer, the keys slightly heavier to the touch. May sat on the bench, adjusting her posture the way Teacher Liu had taught her, and began to play. "Good," he said when she finished. "Remember to pause before you start. Take a deep breath, and don't rush the middle section. That's where you tend to speed up when you're nervous." May nodded, trying to commit his advice to memory. "You're on fourth from last," Teacher Liu continued. "That's a good spot. The audience will still be attentive, but most of the younger children will have already performed, so it will be quieter." "Will there really be that many people?" May asked, her voice smaller than she intended. Teacher Liu smiled slightly. "It's our winter recital, one of the biggest events of the year. But don't think about the audience. Think about the music." Easier said than done, May thought as she made her way to the waiting area where performers would sit until their turn. Through a small window in the door, she could see the seats filling up. She spotted Pavel and two other colleagues taking seats near the back. Then Ling and her family in the third row, just as promised. May's mother was with them, which was a surprise. May hadn't known Ling had invited her. One by one, the students performed. First, the youngest children playing simple pieces with careful concentration, some so small their feet didn't touch the floor as they sat on the bench. Then older students with more complex music. Some played beautifully, some made mistakes but recovered well, and one young boy froze halfway through his piece and had to start over. May watched them all, her anxiety building as her turn grew closer. The pieces were getting progressively more difficult, the performers more accomplished. Right before her was a teenage girl playing a Chopin nocturne with impressive skill. The audience applauded enthusiastically when she finished with a flourish, and then it was May's turn. "Next, we have May Chen playing Claude Debussy's Clair de Lune," the announcer said. May walked onto the stage, her legs feeling like they might give out at any moment. The lights were brighter than she expected, making it hard to see individual faces in the audience, which was somehow both a relief and more terrifying. She sat at the piano, adjusted the bench, and placed her hands in her lap. "Remember to pause," she told herself. "Take a deep breath." For a moment she felt frozen, unable to lift her hands to the keys. The silence stretched, and she heard a slight murmur from the audience. Someone coughed. Then, as if moving on their own, her fingers rose and positioned themselves over the opening notes. She began to play. The first few measures came out hesitantly, a bit too quiet. But as she continued, the familiar feel of the music began to take over. She had practiced this piece hundreds of times. Her fingers knew what to do, even if her conscious mind was paralyzed with fear. Halfway through, something unexpected happened. The nervousness didn't disappear, but it changed into something else. A heightened awareness that made every note feel more alive. She wasn't just playing the piece. She was telling a story with it, her story. All the ridicule, the doubt, the early mornings and late nights of practice, the small victories and frustrating setbacks, all of it was there in the music. When she reached the middle section, the part she usually rushed when nervous, she forced herself to slow down, to let each note breathe. The grand piano responded beautifully, the sound filling the hall in a way her upright at home never could. As she played the final, gentle notes of the piece, May felt a sense of peace wash over her. Whatever happened next, applause, silence, criticism, she had done it. She had faced her fear and played her best. The last note faded and May lowered her hands to her lap, keeping her eyes on the keys, almost afraid to look up. For a moment, there was silence. Had she played so badly that no one wanted to applaud? Then she heard it, a single person starting to clap, then another, and suddenly the whole hall was filled with applause. It wasn't just polite clapping. It was enthusiastic, with a few people even shouting, "Bravo!" May finally looked up, blinking in the bright lights. She couldn't see individual faces clearly, but she could feel the warmth from the audience. She stood, remembering at the last second to bow as Teacher Lou had instructed. As she walked off stage, her legs still shaky, but for entirely different reasons now, she saw Teacher Lou waiting in the wings. His usual reserved expression had been replaced by a broad smile. "Well done," he said simply, but the pride in his voice said much more. The rest of the recital passed in a blur. May returned to her seat, barely registering the final 3 performances. When all the students had played, the director of the academy made a brief speech thanking everyone for coming. And then it was over. In the lobby afterward, May was surrounded by her small group of supporters. Pavel and her colleagues congratulated her, seeming genuinely impressed. Her niece hugged her tightly, saying, "That was so beautiful, Auntie May. Will you teach me to play like that?" Even Ling, who had been skeptical from the beginning, admitted she had been moved by the performance. "I had no idea you could play like that," she said. "You've really been practicing hard, haven't you?" But it was her mother's reaction that meant the most to May. The older woman didn't say much at first, just stood back watching as others praised her daughter. Then, when the crowd around May had thinned a bit, she stepped forward and took May's hands in her own. "Your father would have been very proud," she said quietly. "He always said you had music in your soul." May felt tears spring to her eyes. "Dad said that? But he always told me to focus on practical things, not music." Her mother smiled sadly. "He wanted you to be secure in life. But he used to listen to you singing when you were little and tell me, 'That girl has music in her soul.' I think he would be happy to know you found your way back to it." As they were leaving, May noticed the group of teenage students who had once laughed at her. They were looking at her with expressions she couldn't quite read. Not exactly respect, but something like reassessment. One of them, a boy of about 15 who played advanced classical pieces, approached her hesitantly. "Miss Chen? That was really good. How long did you say you've been playing?" "About 4 months," May replied. The boy's eyes widened. "4 months? And you played Clair de Lune?" May nodded, trying not to smile at his obvious shock. That's really impressive," he said, sounding genuinely surprised. "It took me years to play that piece well." As May walked out into the snowy evening with her family and friends, she felt lighter than she had in years. The recital was over, but her journey with the piano was just beginning. And for the first time, she wasn't worried about what others thought of her playing. She played for herself, for the joy it brought her. That night, back in her apartment, May sat at her piano in the dark, just resting her fingers on the keys without pressing them. Tomorrow she would start learning new pieces. Teacher Lou had suggested she might be ready for some Bach inventions, which were more technically challenging than anything she had played so far. But for tonight, she just wanted to savor the feeling of having shared her music with others and, in doing so, sharing a part of herself that had been hidden for far too long. 1 year had passed since May's first piano lesson. The calendar on her kitchen wall showed it was exactly 12 months to the day since she had stood nervously outside Riverside Music Academy, gathering the courage to ask about lessons. So much had changed in that year. May sat at her piano, not the digital one she had started with, but a small upright acoustic piano that Teacher Lou had helped her find. It wasn't new or fancy, but it had a warm, rich sound that her digital piano couldn't match. She had saved for months to afford it, cutting back on almost everything else in her budget.